I don't think it's recording, Dan.
We are recording.
There you go. Yep. You are recording.
All right, so we'll call the meeting to order of the Business and Finance Subcommittee on Thursday, June 3rd. We are meeting remotely according to under the state of emergency. So the governor's revised executive orders. This might be the last meeting where we can do that unless they pass legislation to extend that. So we're going to take things a little bit out of order. Unless somebody has any objections at Dan's request, so we can discuss Jim Dunbar's evaluation first, and then we'll go into executive session, and then continue on with the rest of our agenda. So seeing no objection, I'll turn the floor to Dan.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me now. And yes, I've got the earphones on, so hopefully it's all good tonight. I'd like to welcome Jim back again to the committee for his annual review, and it's my intent to just give a 50,000-foot overview of the evaluation. While my job is to ensure that the money that's appropriate is spent appropriately, Jim's job is to ensure that we have the money, period. As I wrote in my summary of Jim's evaluation, it has been a challenging year with the pandemic. The state budget wasn't approved until December 2020. Assessment payments to the member towns were based upon FY20 numbers, but our spending was based upon FY21 agreed upon figures. We've had transition on the Business and Finance Subcommittee with members coming and going. We've had the insertion this year of significant federal dollars. We've also had decreases in other areas of our budgets. Athletic gate receipts are down, obviously. ECC revenues are down, and so on and so on. However, through all this, Jim has weathered the storm well, dare I say, exceptionally well. And let's not forget the work that Jim did last summer relative in fall relative to refinancing the district's debt with our financial advisor, saving the towns approximately $570,000 over the next now 8 years. If a town needed an additional week or two this past year to make their payments, that wasn't an issue. Jim always assured me that the cash was there to process the expense warrants, to process the payroll warrants. When there was a last minute glitch and we had to run a quick warrant for what have you, I'd always call Jim, and Jim said, not a problem, the cash is there. We asked the question, who's minding the fort? Jim Dunbar is minding the fort and doing an exceptional job. It is my recommendation, two recommendations to the subcommittee this evening. Number one, that you accept the evaluation as presented. I sent it to Ken. Ken has a copy of that. We're happy to share it with the committee. Then my second recommendation to the committee is that that you bring forward to the full committee another one-year contract for Jim Dunbar effective July 1 of 2021. Thank you, Ken. Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you. Yeah, Dan, thank you so much. I couldn't have done this without your help and without the help of your staff. You guys have been great. And like you said, this past year has been an incredible challenge, but we got through it. Dan and I communicate regularly, and we just work very well together. If anything's coming up, Dan will let me know, or if I recognize something that might be, out of whack, I'll let Dan know. I should also say that it's, it was a challenges for the towns this year as well. I'm the town treasurer in Princeton, and it was certainly a challenge for us and for the other 4 towns, but we worked very well together. And like Dan said, if someone needed a little time yeah, we could do that. So we really worked together very well as a district, and I just can't say enough about the cooperation from Dan and his entire staff and everyone in the building down there. It's just been fantastic this past year because it was difficult, and Dan's staff has been terrific, and I know they've had some illnesses and medical leave, and throughout it all they've covered for each other and done a great job, and for that I can't thank Dan enough.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
It's only the truth, Dan.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim.
All right, well, thank you both. As Dan mentioned, he had sent me late this afternoon, or I read late this afternoon at least, the written copy of this evaluation, which is essentially what Dan said orally in words. I don't know if folks want him to email to them. I'm sure Dan can forward that to Carl and Malaya if they wish as well before we take a vote. So the two motions that we'll put on the floor. The first is I'll take a motion to accept the evaluation of District Treasurer James Dunbar as presented by administration. We can take a first and a second, and then we can see if people want to read it first and then discuss.
So moved.
Second.
Oh, by the way, is somebody from administration taking minutes here?
I wasn't, Ken.
Yeah.
Christine, can you help us out, please? Chris?
I will try. I can also use the recording to get some minutes down.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So Carl made the motion and Malaya seconded it, and people need a moment.
Do you want me to send this off to them, Ken, or?
Would you?
Yep, give me a second.
While Dan does it, I do want to appreciate Jim, all of your work this year, and I'm sure the towns are greatly appreciating the eagle eye you have with regards to the refinancing of our outstanding debt.
Oh, thanks, Ken. I mean, it's part of the job, and I have to admit, being totally honest, Dan was far too kind in his evaluation, in my opinion. But I certainly appreciate it. And Dan did a whole lot of work on that refinancing as well. And anything we can save the towns is certainly worthwhile, and it's shows that we're looking after the taxpayers' dollars, which is obviously very important.
That information was sent, Ken.
Just received it.
Raven. Sorry, must be a chipmunk outside.
No one's talking at the moment, Malaya. We're just waiting for you and Carl to have a moment to. Can you hear? Carl, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, now I can for a moment. It goes in and out, so I'll cross my fingers.
I'll just wait for Carl and Malaya. Once you're ready to either ask a question or you've read it and are satisfied, just let us know.
I'm good. I've skimmed over. I don't have any questions on it.
All right, so if there's not any further discussion of the motion on the floor, we'll take a roll call vote. Member Gustafson,
Yes.
Member Otmar,
Yes.
and Mills, yes. The second motion is to recommend to the full school committee on June 15th, 2021, or I'll change that, say to recommend to the full school committee at our next meeting, 1-year contract as district treasurer for the Wachusett Regional School District.
So moved.
You'll give Member Gustafson a moment to see if she can reconnect. Maybe
No.
you can file and
Now
try
I
to-
can hear you, but
Okay.
it's weird. It's literally goes in and out. Sometimes I can and sometimes I can't. So I'm happy to try to reconnect in case it's me, but it's in and out.
Do you have a second?
I'll try one more time.
I mean, we'll give Malaya a moment.
Ken, let me ask this question.
Quickly, Ken, while she's out, you can second.
I don't know if I technically can. Technically, the chair of a committee is not supposed to make motions or second them, but Malaya, you back?
Ken, what I was gonna say is I know Malaya lives in Holden. I guess, worst case scenario, she's welcome to come to the office here, and I'm happy
I'm
to.
back, but I can't hear anything.
I'm happy to share my laptop with her, Ken, if need be, so we can continue with the meeting.
Let me kind of hit you for a second and call her and see if. I don't know.
Ken, I just sent her a note in the chat.
Yeah, I don't have her, so I'm not calling.
Oh, okay.
I suppose.
Malaya, can you hear us? No. This is not.
Does anyone on the call have Malaya's telephone number?
I can look it up on the
Look it up in PSP.
I can. It's all our numbers. Yeah, Malaya's number is one of the few that isn't actually on the school committee's website, everybody. So, of course. I see. There we go.
Can you see she put it in the chat?
Yeah, I got to figure out how to get to the chat on my iPad. And I'll usually
I'm there. Okay. Ken, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. You know what? Let me give you the number here. I mean, if you don't mind, I'm gonna get this done. 7. Are you? You know what? All right, you got it. Okay.
Yeah, if you can just call into the Google instead of the audio, why don't you try that? Yeah. You can also stay logged in as you are and just mute that one and then call in as a separate window. Okay. Okay.
I am really glad that this is potentially the very last virtual meeting that we're having.
I can only imagine. We've had trouble in Princeton too.
Should I play some music?
Yeah, unless the legislature extends the orders, once so many days after the state of emergency expires, we won't be able to do virtual meetings anyway. So. There are good parts about virtual meetings. I think that the public is more engaged. So to keep some sort of hybrid version where the public can call in, even if we're in person. Like, can you hear us now? All right. So when last you were hearing us or not hearing us, Carl made a motion to recommend to the full school committee at our next meeting a 1-year contract as district treasurer for the Wachusett Regional School District for Dunbar. Second.
I saw her lips say yes.
I did see your lips say yes. You're muted, Malaya.
Yeah. All right. Can you hear that?
We hear many.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
All right. So we can hear you. So it's made and seconded. Is there any discussion? I'm going to assume seeing none. Give an evaluation. Carl, what's your vote?
Yes.
Malaya?
Yes.
Yes, good. And Mills, yeah, unanimous with our thanks. So the tricky thing we're going to do next, Malaya, is we're going to have to go to a different. So we are going to. I will take a motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining agreements, WREA, and discuss pending litigation as the chair deems that discussion in open session may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the WRSDC to return to open session. So, Carl?
So moved.
Malaya?
Second.
Okay, Carl?
Yes.
Malaya?
Yes.
Mills, yes. So we are going to adjourn from this meeting, go to executive session, which is a different link, and then we'll return back to this meeting once we're done. Does everybody have the link for?
Yeah, Joe here. So I've got to join by my phone. I was having issues like Malaya. So I've got the 5060 number. So just when it comes in, if somebody will let that phone number in.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
The one that ends in 60.
Jim Dunbar, thank you. Sorry for the technical issues here, Jim.
No, that's okay. It's understandable. Thanks, everybody, and good luck going forward here. Have a good night.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
We are returning to open session.
Yes, at 8 o'clock. And it's still being recorded. We have to wait for Carl and Malaya to rejoin us. So, still waiting for Malaya. Okay, Malaya, you're back. All right.
Yeah, for now I can hear you, so I'll just keep going.
All right. So we're back in open session, 8:01 p.m. We have a long agenda in front of us, so hopefully we can move through that with the appropriate focus. So the next item on the agenda is for someone to make a motion to recommend to the full school committee payment to Vanpool for the fourth quarter of fiscal year 20 for the agreed upon figure between WRSD and Vanpool.
And Ken, that figure is $189,841.31. 189,841.31.
For that number. Do we have a motion for that?
Moved.
Second.
All right. So Dan, do you have a recommendation?
So thank you. As we have previously discussed, the administration has come to terms with Vanpool for Q4 of FY20. And those terms are to make a payment of 55% of the balance due, and that 189 and change reflects that 55%. This 55% is the same percentage that we made to AA Transportation back in February of 2021 for both home to school and for SPED in district. And by making this payment, this closes the chapter in terms of FY20 readiness payments, and the balance of any encumbrance from FY20 will fall to our bottom line in FY21.
So again, this is just dealing with FY20, not this year, not the next contract. Any issues for this year for billing still remain to be resolved and aren't part of this discussion. This also allows Mr. Dede to pay the bill, right? With the which he needs to do by the end of the fiscal year, which is rapidly meeting us, and also allows us to apply those funds to our maintenance of effort from the previous year. So it's important for filing last year's EOR, for actually having the funds at our hands, and for meeting requirements for federal grants for special education.
Correct.
Given that there is still messiness in 21 that we need to deal with at a different time.
That's correct, Ken.
Is there any further discussion on the floor? All right, seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Malaya?
Yes.
Carl?
Yes.
And Mills, yes. All right, so the next item on the agenda is an update on fiscal year 20, which for anybody watching the recording, remember is not this year that's almost over, it's the previous year, right? So, so Dan, you want to go ahead and walk us through that?
Sure thing. So you have in front of you, this is the budget report of the carry forward from FY20. Again, we brought forward into FY21 1.6 million, primarily all dedicated to transportation. And as you can see, there remains an encumbrance of $263,286.08. So the payment that you just voted to bring to the full school committee in a couple of weeks will be drawn from that payment. So there'll be a balance there, and that balance will be added to the available budget of $349,000 and change, and that will fall to the bottom line for FY21, and that will become part of the certification process for excess and deficiency. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. So fiscal year 21.
All right. So we'll begin with the discussion on fiscal year 21. I'm going to jump down to the revenue piece here. Give me 1 second. Again, as you know, here's the report from Eunice before I make any adjustments, and I'll get into the spreadsheet now. We are, as Ken has stated, we are approaching very quickly the end of FY21. Several points of interest I wish to bring to the committee. Here in the fourth quarter, we made 2 adjustments with the towns. As you know, we brought forward into FY21 $150,000 to be transferred in transportation stabilization. We have since expended that money, and per DESI advisory, you need to make an adjustment, and we did on the final assessments for the towns. Then secondly, we also made an adjustment in the final payment because, again, the state budget wasn't approved until late December of 2020, and our invoices go out on a quarterly basis. So these were sent out in April for the final quarter. So we made a final adjustment for the debt assessment for the towns, and these numbers weren't significant. We are still waiting on the final payment from Sterling for their local contribution, and we should be seeing that payment here. You see the $1 million there. That should be forthcoming, as well as their operational assessment payment as well. So that should be forthcoming. The second noteworthy figure that I can share with you is, as you know, I have filed the amendment for the homeschool transportation for FY20. We increased the expenditure by approximately $560,000. In speaking with the DESI earlier this week, they informed myself and Dr. McCall that the reimbursement for FY21 would be approximately almost 94%. So I did make an adjustment in terms of our estimated second payment. I was told that I would have a definitive number yesterday. Unfortunately, I don't have a definitive number. I hope to have that definitive number early next week, and DESI will be releasing their second disbursements for regional transportation either late next week or early the following week. So that being said, the estimated shortfall for regional transportation, at least as of now, is about $401,000. As you know, it had been significantly greater, but prior to getting the information from DESI. Our charter reimbursements have exceeded the benchmark by approximately $165,000. Our Medicaid reimbursements, and these are confirmed numbers relative to Medicaid. Our Medicaid reimbursements have exceeded the benchmark by approximately $87,000, $86,924. Our interest income, I did make a reduction in terms of our interest. I lowered that to $13,000. And so we're looking, we have $10,645 in the bank. So we're waiting, another adjustment of just over $2,300. And miscellaneous. we have been billing a number of districts across the Commonwealth, and this is the cost share for transportation that we provide to their students to the DEVRO program. The shortfall there again is as of now $21,000, and that is based upon the invoices that we have submitted to districts, and also the revenue that we have in the bank. We can and we will accrue that revenue, and what I mean by that is we have until September 30 of 2021 to receive that income from these respective cities and towns. We are looking at those districts that are in arrears, and we are in the process as well of sending out reminder notices to these districts of the payments due. So as of now, our revenues are below the benchmark, approximately $837,642.90. And again, there are really two issues there. Number one, as I have reported all year long, our Chapter 70 for FY21 is almost $409,000 less than our original budget. And again, we use the governor's budget from way back in January of 20 as our budget. And as you know, the state budget wasn't finalized until late December of this year. So there was a variance there of almost 409,000. And the second figure where there was a tweak, a significant tweak, again, is regional transportation. But given what DESE is telling me, I'm projecting, again, I don't have the definitive number yet, but I'm projecting that variance is going to be less than the $401,000 that I've reported here. Before I leave the revenues, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Just a quick question about regional transportation reimbursement rates. So in a normal pre-COVID year, okay, in the last pre-COVID year, because there was funny stuff before, we get whatever percent of allowable expenses, right? So if we transport students, within 1.5 miles, right, it's not reimbursable expense, right? So how does that work with these readiness payments?
So the way it works, Ken, is that, for example, when we made the readiness payment to AA Transportation back in late February, the value of that was approximately $560,000. That $560,000 gets added to what I had reported on my end of the year report. So right away, if I reported $2 million, it's now $2,560,000. DESE was very, very late this year in releasing the first disbursement of regional transportation. Typically, that is done in January. This year, it wasn't done until almost April 1st. I think it was like March 31st when the first disbursement was released. So what they will do, and what Mr. Sullivan, the Social Commissioner, has stated to me, is that he will look at my amended EOR, and he will make an adjustment to our second payment based upon the total amount that I have now reported to them for FY20. And that total amount includes the additional $560,000. And so he will now allocate that accordingly. And it sounds like he's got significant cash available, because he had stated, again, as I said a few minutes ago, that he estimates that the reimbursement, the total reimbursement this year will be about 94% across the board.
So thank you for that. I just want to kind of clarify my question, just in case I asked it poorly. So what I'm hearing you say then is that the entirety of the readiness payment, DESE is considering as a reimbursable expense.
Yes.
Even though at an ordinary time, our total expenses for transportation wouldn't all be allowable expenses.
Yes, fair to say. And I think this year may be the exception only because of the amount of cash that he has available on hand. I guess the proof will be in the pudding when I find out, next week what that number is. But to be reimbursed at 94% is significant. The past several years, though the reimbursement, I think last year was about at the end of the day was about 84%. That's still a pretty significant jump this year. And I'm going out on a limb a little bit by stating that, yes, I acknowledge that. But again, the message that I'm receiving is that the reimbursement is going to be significant. I guess it'll be validated when I get that number next week. And I was hoping that I could give it to you tonight so that we could put this behind us, check mark, so to speak.
Well, it makes sense because everybody spent less money and there was a certain amount of money to reimburse, so the percentage that they reimburse could be higher. So it's not surprising, right? Which is good. Other people have questions on this topic, Malia?
I was trying to sort out the 94% in my head, but I think that makes sense. If the readiness payments are all included in that makes perfect sense. I unfortunately don't think it's going to be that for next year, but that's a whole different discussion. It would be nice. So I appreciate that update.
Should we move on to the next topic?
All right, Christine asked me to stop presenting because of my screen, but I got to go back there again. So Chris doesn't know the drill here when we do this. Well,
I like to see the people the right size, and when you leave your screen on, it mirrors your screen, and it's annoying.
All right, we're gonna jump into the expense portion. Give me a second to get there. All right, here's again, I ran this budget report for the appropriations a little bit over the May 27th, and at that time, as you saw, we were a little bit under $3 million in terms of an available budget. And again, there are a couple of areas where make it just a tad larger for the audience. A couple of areas. Number one, the undesignated, that's in deficit almost 255,000, 254, 835 and 6 cents, and that's where we have charged off any and all COVID-related expenditures for FY21. Salaries and stipends, again, there was an unencumbered balance of 1.8 million. Benefits and insurance, again, we're going to need to make another adjustment there of 138,000 because that's still short. The reason why instructional support is in deficit is because we have spent in technology, again, all relative to COVID. We're about 81% over budget for technology purchases, and many of them are the Chromebooks that we've been purchasing this year. We are looking to make some adjustments still between instructional support, the general fund, and some of these grants, and I'll talk about that when we get there. So we'll make that adjustment accordingly. Operations and maintenance, again, there's a balance there of 306,000 and change. We are doing a couple things as we wind down the year, and I'll talk about that when I walk you through the projections. Our sped tuitions, again, we'll be looking to spend down that almost 266 in its entirety. Other operating costs, we still need to make a tweak based upon the final state budget numbers. Transportation, as you can see, there's a little bit under $1 million that is not encumbered. And looking at the encumbrance, there are still dollars that in the encumbrance that will most likely also fall to our bottom line. And in our debt service, again, we have approximately 178,000 in round numbers that'll be available. In terms of the projected expenditures, let me just fix this. In terms of the salary appropriation, where we're estimating to spend $320,000. Number one, we do need to make an adjustment, as I have been reporting to the committee, with food service staff. Director Barton is projecting a shortfall of just under $80,000. I just rounded it up to $80,000. Number two, our day-to-day subs. Those costs have been significant, and so we'll need to. I'm projecting out that we'll need to spend another $70,000 between now and the end of school. Our mentors, again, actually, this $45,000 is encumbered. Those dollars are encumbered. Long-term subs, again, relative to the issue with the subs, as I have reported in the past, we're paying a number of building subs, approximately $150 a day, just to be in the buildings. And then adjustments for groups. There is one group that there has been resolution on their contract for this year, so that money is allocated to make that adjustment, and that'll be brought forward at a future school committee. And if that doesn't get voted prior to June 30, we'll need to bring that forward to carry forward into FY22. In terms of instructional support, we're anticipating another $250,000 in expenditures relative to textbooks and technology. In terms of operations and maintenance, the $100,000 that I have there, I have as I wrote, I've got a procurement out there now where we will be looking to address next door in ECC the HVAC issue. So I've got a bid documented out there. There's a bid opening in 2 weeks, and we are hopeful that when school ends later on this month, that the very next day that we can begin to tackle that project there. Pupil services, again, as I had previously reported, and as I'll show you when we get into the grants and revolvings, we're looking to make some adjustments between athletic revolving and the general fund. So the money that's there, again, to fix that shortfall. In terms of the sped tuitions, again, as I said, we're looking to basically spend down that appropriation in its entirety. And in terms of transportation, again, looking to make there is a balance there. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. Other operating costs before I get to transportation. Other operating costs, again, we're going to need to make a transfer into that, again, to cover the school choice out and the charter assessments. For transportation, again, I'm not projecting any additional expenditures, but there are encumbrances that are greater than the anticipated expenditures for the balance of the year. And then for debt service, as I said, we have almost $178,000 that is available. So I am projecting additional expenditures of a little bit over $1 million, which would leave on our bottom line 1.9 million. But again, as I had reported earlier, with the revenues shortfall of approximately 837,000, we're still looking at a little bit over $1 million that would be on our bottom line. There is still work to do. I always talk about those surprises that occur in June. And again, other work that we need to do is, for example, as you know, in the undesignated, again, there's a deficit there. We are still looking to make adjustments between the general fund and some of these federal grants, and I'll talk about those when I get to the grants. So that shortfall there is going to be reduced or negated in its entirety. And in doing so, that's going to add to our bottom line for FY21. I did that pretty quickly. I apologize, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions on the expense side.
I have a salary question. If I'm reading this right, the balance under salaries would be about 1.5 million. Did I read that correctly? Oh, no, wait. Yes, I read that right. Correct?
Yep.
So I'm curious about a couple things because I noticed, for example, recently we had the elementary counselors posted still on our website, and I thought we'd already hired those people. So I'm curious what positions we thought we would have that were not filled or have been delayed. I'm just curious how we end up with that big of a balance, because I was curious about some of the things I'd seen posted recently that I thought were already in our budget and being paid for, and even people working. So
Right. So, Malaya, I'll start with the counselors. There is a posting up for the counselors. There was a posting this past, I think it was past January. Those positions were not filled this year. That didn't happen this year. The posting that is up there now is for FY22. So the counselors are, for example, are rolled into that 1.5. There were several other positions, and I just don't have the listing here in front of me, but I can certainly get that for you to the committee that were in our original budget for 21 that were not filled this year. Back earlier in the year, and I'll get the complete listing for you.
I mean, it's not urgent to the bottom line, but I would be very curious what those positions are, because we also had a lot of conversations about the ones that were, the many positions we had to let go last summer, and then some of them were refilled, some of them were not. And I just, given that we have such a high balance, it suggests that there were a lot of positions that we anticipated having that, well, maybe not a lot, but at least several that we anticipated filling that were not. And I'd be very curious what those are going forward.
One thing also, Malaya, that is contributing to that balance is that we are using these both state and federal grants. For example, and again, you'll see this when we get to that discussion on the grants. We received this year, it's called the State Coronavirus Grant. It's approximately $245,000 even. And in that grant, we have allocated, and we've spent in that grant approximately $100,000 for day-to-day subs. So that cost that normally would have been in our operating budget was transferred into the grant. There are also some other federal grants where costs related to COVID, be they the overtime cost for our HVAC gentlemen, and also any and all costs relative to school lunch that weren't charged to school lunch because the money wasn't there. Those were originally in our budget in the general fund, and we backed them out of the general fund into those grants. Granted, $100,000 for day-to-day subs, and 11,000 here and another 20,000 there. That doesn't get you other 1.4 million. But again, the 1.4 again is also a combination of other positions that have not been filled in FY21.
Well, I was also curious because things like the extra subs we had for COVID that are charged to the grants were not actually in our original budget in March, because we didn't anticipate that need. It came up after we passed our budget and COVID became our reality. So they weren't in our March budget. So I guess I'd just like a more detailed accounting of what we haven't. It's a bigger question than you. It's a staffing question in general, because that seems, I'm surprised to see that much left over in that line. And given how many positions we cut and how many, we have had subs, but the subs also were not in our original budget because they were COVID expense we didn't anticipate in February and March when we made the original budget. So I'd just be curious where that came from, because I know people will see that and ask. So thank you for providing that in the future, or whoever will provide it.
I would too that Dan, while the finance issue is a question that we can have for you, I think that, and I'll send the chair a message about this, I think it's really the superintendent's job to be telling us this, because his decision about what positions to hire or let go or not rehire,
Right.
whatever we want to say, which, and if it's affecting the curriculum, that's something that he should be bringing to the committee for discussion at least, and not necessarily approval, but that should come from him, and
Yeah, it's definitely beyond Dan. It's really just making sure. I mean, the finance question is making sure we know what happened to those, how we ended up with such a balance, just to understand. But the bigger question is beyond Dan, obviously. So thank you.
and to make sure we can fund those positions for next year, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So Dan, in terms of the transfers into school choice and the transfers into or circuit, not transfers into, but circuit breaker, but charging back things from circuit breaker into the general budget so we can carry circuit breaker forward, right? If I'm just trying to do mental math, right? So you're saying we've got somewhere ballpark $1 million in projected balance. Of course, it can change, right?
Yes.
About $430,000 from the fiscal year 20, right? That would add on to that. That's carrying forward. We probably have about 450 that we're not going to spend, because we had about 1.4 in certified E&D. If we spend 950 of it, right, that gives us back 550 thereabouts. So we're talking, $2 million. Is that all going to drop to E&D thereabouts? Is there going to be some of that transferred into other carry forwards? Or
it is, Ken, and I think a great example of that will be when we get into our discussion, albeit brief discussion, about athletic revolving, for example. And I'm going to show you a couple of deficits in there that have to be corrected. The E&D process, the Department of Revenue, with the exception of school lunch, they look at every single account, not only in the general fund, but also in grants, in revolving accounts, in gifts and grants, etc. And what I need to be about rather immediately now, and we've begun that process, is looking at every single account. And again, a great illustration will be athletics when we get to that momentarily, is then to make the adjustment between athletics and the general fund. So athletics remains whole at the end of 21, but that may reduce the available balance in the general fund. And you'll see in athletics that though the cumulative revolving account has a very short, small deficit, there are several sub-accounts within high school athletic revolving that have some significant deficits, and you'll see that momentarily. I'm not trying to tease you, and you'll see that momentarily. And if you want, I can jump into that right now.
Just to clarify, just so I'm sorry if I'm asking the question poorly, but anything you were going to transfer voluntarily, you've already done, right? So into school choice, into circuit breaker, like the carry forward is already taken care of for those.
No, Ken, we're not done. We're not done making other adjustments. What I may be doing, for example, is again, we're looking to spend down the balance in the sped tuitions. Again, Christine has an available budget. If you can see it here, this 265,693. And if there are no other tuitions going out between now and the end of school, and it's highly unlikely that there'll be anything of significance going out, what I will do is that I will make an adjustment between circuit breaker and the general fund to reduce again, as you can see here, I'm projecting to spend down that 265. But I may be spending more in the general fund, reducing the available budget in the general fund, but at the same time increasing the carry forward in circuit breaker.
And do we need to approve that, or do we not?
Those are journal entries, Ken.
Because we used to approve it. I think a year or two ago we changed that.
Yeah, and again, I do recall that, Ken, when I first started. I know that Mr. Scanlon had asked the auditors a question about journal entries. I can tell you, we do journal entries all the time. We on a daily basis, sometimes we'll do a journal entry. You know, something gets charged to this account, and it should get charged to that account. One of my staff will do the journal, and I'll sign it, or I'll do the journal entry. It's correcting an incorrect classification of an expenditure. Yes, you're correct. A couple years ago, you used to approve all journal entries. Sometimes, we might be doing a journal entry for just to make a point, but it might be $100. If that's the case, there's a lot of approvals that you're going to be doing, and I believe there was an opinion rendered by Melanson CPAs almost 3 years ago that stated that a journal entry does not have to be approved by school committee or by finance. I'm certainly happy to tell you all the activity that we'll be doing at the end of the year. I can certainly write that up for you. But the journals are different than a budget transfer between appropriations.
Yeah, I think it would be appropriate if we could just see, a summary of not the $100, this to that, but the major year-end journal entries that of the ilk that we used to approve, just so we are transparent, about what that would be.
Any other
questions? Move on to athletics or whatever Dan wants to
Sure. So in your packet, I had given you a link to grants and revolving funds, and for some reason I tried to click on it today. I don't know if you had any luck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up on the screen here the grants, and I'm going to walk you through the grants. So hopefully you all can see here. This is the FY21 fund code 1113. Can you all see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. So this was what, and again, as I had written in my narrative, I was going to give a quick overview primarily of the federal grants. I'm happy to answer any questions about the other grants, and I will email that to you. And again, I apologize. I thought the link that I attached would work, but apparently it didn't work. So this is one of the stimulus grants, and we've talked about this earlier this year. This was approximately $176,898, and this grant was used to purchase approximately 1,200 Chromebooks and also 50 mobile hotspots. This grant is fully expended. The next federal grant, and again, this is another stimulus grant, if you will. This is that we used this fiscal year, approximately 146,000 and change. I apologize. Let me get my notes correct. Okay, so the 176,898. I'll get it straight. The 176,898. This was ESSER 1, and this money was used to purchase licenses for Lexia Learning, for PPE, and also for cleaning supplies. I apologize for that. The 118 grant, the 146 and change, this grant, which is fully expended as well, was used to purchase approximately 1,200 Chromebooks, and also about 50 mobile hotspots. So these two federal grants that we received this year have been fully expended. I'm now going to go to this spreadsheet here, and again, as you can see down the bottom here, and I will email this to the committee, are all the respective grants for FY21, and this is the link I thought that you would have received. But what I'd like to do here is just highlight a couple of grants here. So the first grant that I want to highlight is the grant known as SCP, and let me get there in a second. This SCP, this also is a stimulus grant from FY20. This is a state grant, though, and this grant is known as the State Coronavirus Grant, with a value of almost $246,000, $245,950. This grant is in essence spent. This grant ends on June 30 in a couple of weeks. And though, as you can see here, when I did this last week, there was a balance on this grant. That balance basically was closed out today. And this grant, again, I had talked about the payroll. This is the $100,000 that we spent for substitute teachers, and then the 90,000, the 55, and the 55,950. These two lines are a combination of PPE and more PPE. But this grant again is in essence spent, and it is spent because we are doing some, again, to your point, Ken, we're doing journal entries. And as I have reported a moment ago, if you recall, in the undesignated appropriation, there was a deficit in there, approximately $245,000. So that deficit is being reduced because we'll be making journal entries between the general fund and this grant. So we'll pick up cash in the general fund, and we will fully expend this grant here. The next grant that I want to talk about is this grant here, Fund Code 115. This also is a federal grant. This is the ESSER 2 grant for FY21. And again, we have spent to date approximately 322,000, almost 323,000 and change. And how have we spent this grant? Just some high level examples of expenditures in the contracted services. Not all, but a majority of the expenditures here, the 124,436, were relative to HVAC work. And again, these were charges that were made originally to the general fund, and then once the grant was approved, the charge was reversed back to this grant here. In FST 480, this 66,000 and change. Again, most of that was relative to textbooks and instructional technology. And then in FT 451, this almost 96,000 right here, that the primary expenditures there were again more Chromebooks that were bought this year. Some of this money is being used to also fund projects in FY22. For example, approximately $50,000 out of this grant, out of contracted services, is being used, for example, to fund Interface, which is our contract with the William James College. So that'll be funded in 22 out of this grant. The last grant that I'd like to. Yep.
So what is the date that you have to expend this money by?
This is, I believe it's a year from now, next December of 2022, I believe it is, for the ESSER 2.
So if we have eligible expenses in 22, we'll still have funds to draw from.
Yes, we will. Yep. Yes. And then the last grant that I want to talk about at a high level here This is the school reopening grant, and again, we've talked about this in previous meetings. We've talked about this in our budget presentation, but this $1,572,300 is pretty much spent out. And again, this grant was used again to buy another additional 1,200 Chromebooks, to purchase 50 hotspots. This grant was also used to purchase some additional math and reading assessments. We used this grant to make some textbook purchases in addition to what was also in the general fund. We use this grant to make PPE purchases. Also, we use this grant to pay, I mentioned this earlier, to pay for overtime costs of our HVAC person that was originally charged to the general fund. That's this $14,290 here. That in essence a portion of the overtime costs that were originally charged to the general fund. Also, we used this grant to pay for some of our unemployment costs from FY21. If you, I think maybe I had stated many meetings ago, when we got our first unemployment bill late or mid-year this year, it was approximately $270,000 for unemployment, and we used, I believe, it's almost $250,000 out of this grant to pay that $270,000 unemployment bill. And again, just some other expenditures. We also use this grant for professional development costs for teachers, and also we use this grant to pay for costs related to school lunch, which included packaging costs for Margaret, when she was doing the remote lunch programs at the various buildings in the district. Again, we charged it to the general fund originally, and then when the grant was available, we backed out the cost into this grant. So that's kind of a quick summation, and that gets you pretty darn close to the 1,572 and change for this grant for FY21.
So Dan, what's the category for line 10, the one that has $900,000 in it?
So, and the expenditures in there, again, Ken, that's probably a combination of a lot of PPE, cleaning supplies, bathroom partitions. They were probably all rolled into that. I can certainly run a detailed report and get you the exact charges there. That probably include some of the assessments that I mentioned a moment ago, the reading, the STAR reading and the STAR math assessments that get you to that almost $900,000.
I think that you don't have to go through it in person necessarily, but if there is a button you can push, I'm not trying to make work for you right now, but if there's a button you can push that we can look at our leisure, I think it would be doing our due diligence. Because I mean, I have total confidence we had a lot of expenses this year, but a lot of it's PPE, which is fine, and we had a lot of those expenses. But it's just hard in my mind, like, because I don't really know, like, a mask and a partition times 7,000 times whatever. I have no sense, even big picture, of how much things cost, and I think we'd be doing our jobs if we just saw a printout of it. And again, I'm not trying to ask you for a pretty report or anything. I'm fine with just a dump, of. I'm sure others are probably fine with that too.
That's what I asked for in an email earlier today. Yeah. So essentially, so we could then have more detail about, people who don't have time to listen to this, but also have more detail about where have we spent all of these funds that, I mean, we could go back through warrants and probably figure it out, but it would be nice to have the accounting
So Ken, for Kyle, just so that you know, and as Malaya had said a moment ago, she had asked, could she have a sense as to, what's behind these lines, and so I'm happy to do that. What I will do is that we will work tomorrow I'll call it an Excel document, and I'll highlight in that Excel document some of these expenditures. I'm happy to run a Munis report for you and run it in detail, but I think that's probably a lot of information that maybe you don't want to see. I'm happy to show it to you as well. I'm happy to show it to you.
Now, I'll say myself, but I want whatever it takes you the least amount of time to do to give us the information that we can use. I don't need it to be processed for me and have you do a whole day's worth of work. If you just want to dump the Munis data on us, that I really got no problem.
We can read that. I mean,
whatever is easier for you. Just and like as a for instance, like I was trying to do like mental math, which is never really great on, but it seems like we bought almost 4,000 Chromebooks. Is that the case?
4,000 Chromebooks.
It was like just 1,200 from that, 1,200 from this. It seemed like it added together to at least over 3,000 Chromebooks. Great.
Certainly, if not more. I'm sure in my quick summation of what was, again, I was just trying to highlight some of the key expenditures. I'm sure, but keep in mind too, as I said in my discussion of the general fund, some of the technology lines they're all in deficit, and again we'll make some adjustments, but we're not going to have the federal resources available for all of the expenditures for technology this year. So some of those lines in the general fund will remain in deficit unless I do transfers. But there were probably more Chromebooks purchased out of the general fund, which I did not speak to here, Ken.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just a downstream, and we're not asking, I don't think any of us are asking for you to do a pretty up report right now. It's useful to be able to tell the towns when they say, where'd you spend all that money? Say, well, we bought 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 Chromebooks, whatever is the right number. We put all the partitions in the bathrooms. We spent $500,000 on masks and hand wash and partitions. I think like that's very tangible, right? And at least for the sense of the Chromebooks and some of the textbooks is going to have a long-term positive, right? Because it probably put us ahead a little bit of where Bob had wanted to be in terms of rolling out one-to-one, for middle and high school at least. So it's a good story, and I think most of us can dump. We don't want to put work on it right at the end of it.
Can you folks hear me okay, by the way?
Yes.
at the moment, yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're better than you've ever been, so that's good. Keep those headphones on.
Thank you, Christine.
I had another related question. You mentioned professional development in there, and I know that's such a small amount in the whole scope of all this, but was that COVID related specifically to COVID, or was that we use COVID funds to cover professional development that we would have done on our own anyways?
I think it was, if I can, Dan, do you mind?
Yep, go ahead.
I think it was PD specifically on virtual teaching. So on hybrid.
So yes, COVID related. Thank you.
Exactly. So if it ended up in here, it was specifically about COVID.
So just wanted to do a quick time check. We are approaching the 9 o'clock hour. So again, I'm just trying to be efficient with the time here. And at this point, we will be pushing 9:30. Just want to make sure that people are okay with that.
I think we saw the agenda. I think we anticipated.
Okay. I'm going to jump into again. These are all the grants from this year. Every single grant that we have. Again, I did as I wrote in my executive summary. I wanted to give you kind of a 50,000-foot overview of some of the more salient federal and state grants for this year. I will email this document to you. Again, I apologize. I thought the link was going to work. I was trying to be creative, as you know. Typically, I would have printed out all these reports for you. You'd have more paper than you probably want to look at. But I'll email this to you, and I'm happy to answer any specific grant questions that you have. That being said, I'd like to just jump into circuit breaker for a second. Again, our carry forward from FY 20 into 21 was almost 1.1, 1050 for tuitions, and roughly $47,207 and change for the almost 1.1. Year to date, we've received 2.4 in revenues for FY 21. And again, that is through the end of March. We are projecting again this year in terms of revenues for circuit breaker $3.2 million. So when you look at the carry forward in the year-to-date receipts, we're at 3.5 million in terms of receipts for this year. In terms of expenditures, we spent almost 2.3, for tuitions, and roughly 52,000 and change in terms of supplies. We've got almost 504,000 encumbered here in tuitions that will be liquidated, leaving a balance in the tuition line of 728,000 and change. I'd like to jump to one other screen real quick because I want to stay with tuitions real quick. I had talked about this in my executive summary. So for tuitions for FY21, we have 2.7 in the general fund. We are projecting almost 3.3 in circuit breaker, and that's a confirmed number from the DESE for FY21, and that is if they don't make an additional payment beyond what they're supposed to make in this month in June. The carry forward for tuitions, again, was 1050. Again, that's a tuition amount only. And then our 240 grant, we had 1.5 in tuitions. So total funds available for tuitions is 8.6 for FY21. As I said a moment ago, we're looking to spend out of the general fund the entire appropriation, of 2.7. We are looking. We must spend the carry forward of $1 million. We have spent the 1.5 in the 240 grants. In our estimated expenditures out of FY21 for circuit breaker is just a little bit under 1.6 at 1,573. Which leaves us with an estimated carry forward as of now of 1.7 in circuit breaker, and that would be the FY21 disbursement of 3.2, and of that 3.2 as of now, we'd be looking to bring forward approximately 1.7, and that's about $200,000 greater than we had projected a couple of months ago when we were working the 21 budget. So I wanted to jump into this screen here when we were talking about the tuitions to get you to the estimated carry forward. So do we have any questions about circuit breaker, 21 circuit breaker, and the projected carry forward before I go back to the screen?
So we're carrying over the 1.7 approximately into FY22.
Yes, that's the estimate. Yes, it is.
Okay.
The estimate. Let's remember Dan's, downstairs and I'm upstairs.
No, I get that. I will. This is not a Dan question, but probably will come up next week. Christine.
Sure.
If we're carrying that much over, I have heard some people questioning if we are actually meeting all of our needs in special education, which is not a me question. I'm just relaying it and fiscally making sure we're meeting those needs since we're carrying such a large amount. Like, are we I don't know. I'm not going to get into the bigger
So
discussion,
Malaya,
but
I
it
think
has
I
been
told
raised
you, yeah.
so that it can be addressed, in
Yeah,
other
but I
forums.
think I told you before, I did a
Really good.
really deep dive into our in-district kids, and so we were able to claim back more services for our in-district kids. We've actually put out of district more students than we did under my first year, most definitely. We had yeah, so.
I trust you that we are. I just know that question has been asked of me every time people see a very large number that we're carrying forward. They say, are we meeting all the needs that we need to? And I said, I can relay the question. So
No, I appreciate you relaying the question, and I appreciate your support. I think we're meeting kids' fate. That's my job, and I think
And Malaya, one thing that I've told Christine is as we come to the end of 21 and we gear up for 22, again, she won't be writing the 240 grant until sometime this summer, and it probably won't get approved until probably early to mid-September of next fall. So this also helps Christine as a bridge funding source, if you will. Granted, there's money in the general fund, but certainly she's had some pretty significant unanticipated needs that we've addressed in Circuit Breaker in the 240 grant. And yes, Christine and I have a running joke because if you did a deep dive into various lines in the general fund, there are some accounts that are in deficit, within the general fund that certainly I can address. So this is a projection for the carry forward into 22, and again, it serves as a bridge until the 240 grant is approved for Christine, along with the general fund for 22.
I appreciate that, and I expect that will come up again in the future. But I appreciate that for where we are right now.
When you built your budget estimate for next year, what was your assumption of what your carry forward, like what was your assumption then of what your carry forward was going to be? You're saying about $200,000?
No. For 22, we were looking at I believe it was 1.5 at that time.
Okay.
I mean, if you think about it, guys, it's really only carrying forward $200,000 because we carried forward 1.1 before. So we added 600,000 to it, if you will. Does that make sense? Maybe I should be quiet.
Well, I think what has helped us to bring forward a balance, and I understand your concerns, Malaya, but I will say this. Last year from 20 to 21, the district for the first time did bring forward a balance in Circuit Breaker, and we've begun to build upon that balance, and certainly this helps us to address those unanticipated needs that may occur in special education. Again, it's 1.7 today, but if there are any surprises, this becomes a funding mechanism to address any special education surprises that we may have. All right, are we good here?
Yeah, I think we should probably move on.
Okay, school choice, again, FY20 was the first year, I think in a number of years, that you brought forward school choice. You brought forward approximately 372,000 and change. Our year-to-date receipts for school choice to almost 274,000. And so between the carry forward in this year's revenues, as of now, you're at almost 646,000 and change. The $9,000 in expenditures, these were surprises from FY20 that showed up after we had closed the fiscal year. These charges will remain in school choice. So that that gives us, again, an available budget of almost $637,000. What is not reflected here would be the final disbursement from DOR for school choice, which is why I wrote in my executive summary that I'm projecting a carry forward in FY21 school choice of approximately $684,144 into FY21. I'm sorry, FY22. Any questions about school choice?
So big picture, and I'm not holding you any numbers here, Dan, because I know the year's not over. About 650 more for circuit breaker carried forward next year than we did this year, right? As Christine mentioned.
Yes.
300,000-ish more in school choice this year than last year, right? So we're in the 900-950 range of more carrying forward, right? Does this more reflect ways to offset next year's assessments in a one-time thing because of challenges, or is this a long-term strategy to build up these accounts to this level for unanticipated expenses?
Ken, my response is probably not going to be a popular response, but this is the latter, a long-term strategy to build up what I would call liquid funds that would enable the district to address any unanticipated needs. The estimated 1.7 in circuit breaker, that may be a big number. I would argue that if nothing else, there should be a carry forward of some amount in circuit breaker. That's number one. The issue with circuit breaker is that those costs are restricted only to special education. And certainly, those costs could address any staffing needs. They could address any unanticipated tuition needs, any contractual obligations, etc. So if you just remove the 1.7 or the additional 600, as you said, the fact that we've begun to build up liquid funds in circuit breaker, for me, addresses the concern that I expressed to Darryl when I started a couple years ago, that we didn't have any liquid funds to address problems with special education, number one, and then with school choice, because school choice, you have tremendous flexibility as to how those funds are spent. And aside from, a building project, those funds can be used for essentially everything and anything in instruction. And historically, the district has used school choice to offset the cost for health insurance. We didn't do that in 22, but so you've got in school choice, again, potentially almost, not quite, but almost 700,000, 684 and change projected of liquid funds that if there was a problem someplace, you could go into school choice and use them. For example, I guess what I'm thinking is, I mentioned this earlier in our discussion, the issue with a Q4 payment from FY20, that maybe this could be an option if other things don't work out. I'm just saying. So you've got liquidity here in school choice, and this gives you the ability to tackle. For example, a couple years ago, we put down 250 out of the E&D, as for the turf field project at the high school. And we had to go through the process of making the towns aware, et cetera, before we tapped into E&D. Had you, I'm thinking aloud as I'm talking. I'm not so sure we could have used school choice, because that was a construction project that probably wouldn't have passed muster. That was a bad example. I'll take that example back. I retract my example. How's that? But the point is that you've got funds here that you haven't had before to address those unanticipated surprises that maybe the general fund couldn't address.
And of course, just school choice will go to zero within 5 years because we haven't taken school choice in quite some time. So we're really just dealing with the high school and maybe the 8th graders right now that have school choice.
It will, yes, if you spend down this balance, eventually it will be zero if you spend down the balance.
Dan, quick question just to kind of add to that or build off of that. Does the school choice, do those funds have a expiration date on them? Or in theory, could we just be sitting on those for several years and just kind of have them, as you said, kind of just there as liquidity if we needed it?
It's the latter, Kyle. These are revolving funds. Yes, you in a perfect world, we could keep this 636 here and not touch it for the next 5 years. I think there's a problem, potential problem, which is that the theory behind school choice money is that the funds are to be used for those students who are choosing into the district. If in 5 years we don't have any school choice students, I think you would probably need to look at spending down that cash. But this rolls from year to year, so you could it could sit there. I wouldn't advise it for in perpetuity, by no means.
Right, and it was more just I just wanted to make sure that like there wasn't something where it was like you can only like because some other things you can only like I mean like we saw with the transportation stuff that you can kind of roll things forward for a little bit, but after 2 years it drops away. And so like as long as there's not something like, oh yeah, actually after like 3 years it drops away, so we would have to be thinking like, oh, 2 years down the road we're gonna have to use this for something, or as opposed to keeping it there for emergencies that pop up. So
correct. A great example is circuit breaker. With circuit breaker, you're allowed to bring forward into the following fiscal year the value of the disbursement from that fiscal year. We're targeted to receive 3.2 million. We are going to spend some of that 3.2 million, but the point is the 1.7 that we're projecting to carry forward, that must be expended by June 30 of 2022. That must be off the books. Just for example, as I said earlier, the 1050, the little bit over $1 million that we brought forward into FY21, that money has been spent. That was the first place that we went to for tuitions to get it off the books, because that had to be expended by June 30 of this year. So that's a great example. Circuit breaker you can bring forward for 1 year only. School choice you can bring it forward for several years.
All right, so our next item, because we still have a bunch of things on the agenda. I know some of them you need to get to.
So I guess we've talked about the sped tuitions. Ken, let me just go back to the screen here. All right, we've talked about the tuitions. Let me go up to the budget transfers. If I may just get to the transfers. I have before you this evening 3 budget transfers to move money out of salaries and stipends. The first would be $140,000 into benefits and insurance to cover that shortfall. Excuse me. The second transfer is approximately $208,000 into other operating costs. The next would be $315,000 from salaries and stipends into instructional support. And as I said, in instructional support, we've in technology, we have made adjustments between the general fund and some of these stimulus grants, but not in the entirety of the expenditures. So those technological expenditures have in essence brought that appropriation in deficit. And so I'm looking to address that deficit with these budget transfers.
Well, let's tell a clear story one at a time. So why don't I see if someone will make a motion to recommend to the full school committee budget transfer of $140,000 from salaries and stipends to benefits and insurance appropriation.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. The short story, Dan, here on benefits and insurance appropriation of why we need 140 more. What's our elevator pitch on that?
So the elevated pitch is that we are not using school choice. We are not using the school lunch revolving as we typically would do in the past to offset the cost of insurance.
Okay. Other questions? All right. Seeing none, Malaya?
Yes.
Carl?
Yes.
Mills, yes. I'll take a motion to recommend to the full school committee a budget transfer of $208,000 from salaries and stipends to other operating costs appropriation.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. So elevator on what the OOCs are.
This is the end result of the final FY21 state budget and the increased cost in school choice out and child school assessments.
And that's on top of what we did last time, the last time we made a transfer.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Other questions? Seeing none, Malaya?
Yes.
Carl?
Yes.
Mills, yes. So take a motion to recommend to the full school committee a budget transfer of $315,000 from salaries and stipends to the instructional support appropriation.
So moved.
Second.
So I'll do your elevator for you this time, because I think you already told us, right, that there were Chromebooks, hotspots, etc. You charged a bunch of them to grants where you could. This is what you're charging to the general fund to make up that balance. Is that a fair, what I heard?
Yes, it is. The technology portion in instructional support is in deficit about 80%. All investments in the district.
This is some place where I think it would be nice to have a number from Barry of how many Chromebooks and how many hotspots did we buy this year? Because those are like tangible numbers of things that aren't going away, right? So they're also nice long-term investments in our technology plan, right? And I'm sure Barry could tell you that number right off the top of his head, probably, right? I know they're not all coming from this line, but it's a nice story for the district to tell when they go out and try and get a budget for next year about how we spent money in ways that's going to benefit students for the next 3 or 4 years, or however long it takes a Chromebook to last.
I'll get that information for the committee, subcommittee.
I would say it will also be beneficial because in a few years we will have a very large number of replacements that will need done, which were not originally planned for, and probably won't have federal grants to pay for them. So we will need to know what that is.
Yep. And so there will get to be that. Well, the technology plan, which isn't necessarily Dan's, I'm sure he gives money insight into it, but his bailiwick is going to have to be adjusted to account for that, because we already had that a little bit with Mountview, right? Because the town of Holden bought a lot of Chromebooks when they built that building, which is now, those Chromebooks are getting older, and now this other influx will, it's, like I said, they all kind of come due at the same time.
Yep. It just helps to know, to be able to look back and see what we actually spent.
Yeah. In theory, if all the 6th through 12th graders have them, you just have to replace one class a year, right? If they last for 7 years, which is probably doubt. So anybody else? All right. So Malaya?
Yes.
Carl?
Yes.
And Mills, yes. I'm trying to move the screen, but I should move my computer, not your screen. I can't move your screen, Dan.
All right.
So So 22, there's some
Well,
clients
Ken,
there.
I apologize. Before we leave 21, just three quick things. Number one, we didn't get into school lunch in great detail, but I did report the deficit when I was going through projected expenditures. And again, we'll be making a journal entry. Margaret, again, projecting about 80,000 plus deficit. We've talked about this all year, and we'll make that adjustment. And then secondly, within athletics, again, in terms of the entire athletics revolving, and again, you'll see this when I email to you. They're looking at a cumulative deficit of about 15,000, but there are several sub accounts within athletics that I'll need to correct for the purpose of excess and deficiency, because if we close the year out where, as I said earlier, where there are lines that are in deficit, those become hits to excess and deficiency, and I don't want, as was the case in 20, I don't want any hits at all, so that we get the full bang for our buck when our E&D is certified. And the last, finally, I can say to the committee, just today, we did receive our disbursement from FEMA. The money is literally in the bank, and we have set up a special revenue account. FEMA, and as I reported, we did. It's 112,000 and change. It is in the bank. The account is set up. And again, one of the reasons why we made an adjustment in the 22 budget is that we were expecting this, and it's in before June 30. So again, as we clean up business for 21, whatever COVID-related charges we can't back into one of these federal or state grants, that will be my second FEMA application, and I'll keep my fingers crossed that it's a little bit less than 10 months before we see the cash, but the cash is in.
Okay, we move on to 22.
22. So for FY22, we did receive our ESSA 3 allocation. It's $1,364,812. This is a multi-year grant that expires on September 30th, 2024. And Deputy Burlow is just begun to write this grant. And there are some charges, again, that we will look to offload into this grant from our FY21 budget. This grant has an effective date back to March of 2020. So again, any COVID-related charges, any HVAC, HVAC, PPE, what have you, extended unemployment costs, or additional sub-teacher costs that currently sit in the general fund, we could back into this grant upon approval, but he's only begun to write the grant. And hopefully the turnaround will be fairly quickly so that we can make these adjustments prior to June 30 of 2021. Secondly, I am asking the committee to recommend to the full committee, and I have this in writing from DESE and DOR, that we should take a vote. We must take a vote on the use of E&D for our FY22 budget. And as you know, we're looking to use $950,000. I am recommending that you bring this forward to the full committee, and when we meet in a couple of weeks, that they vote the value of $950 from E&D to be used for the FY22 budget.
So just to get this through my head, in prior, we made an adjustment at the end of the day of how much we were putting in there, and we voted on that budget. Historically, maybe this wasn't the right thing, when we voted the budget, right, in years past, and it included using E&D to offset assessments, the assumption was that the vote to approve that budget in toto included the use of whatever E&D was in that assumption, right? So are you saying, so I guess my question is, are we voting this separately because of the last minute change that was voted on? Or are you saying in future years, we always need to take a separate vote on the E&D in addition to voting the budget itself?
You should take a separate vote when you, even if you were using $100,000, you should take a separate vote for the use of that $100,000 out of excess and deficiency for the following year's budget. I am happy, and I will send to the subcommittee tomorrow the written confirmation that I received from both DESI and DOI relative to this. And this vote has to be done by June 30. So, though we didn't take a vote originally when the first budget was approved, I did recommend to the superintendent that this be on the agenda for the second vote. It didn't make the agenda. But if the committee recalls, a year ago, it was on the agenda. It didn't get supported, but it was on the agenda a year ago to use $450,000. And when the vote was taken, it didn't pass. So whenever you use a sum of money out of E&D, I'm advising now, as your school business official, that you vote that value, whatever the value is, and that it be done by June 30. But so we have time by June 30 for the following fiscal year. Otherwise, you lose that money.
Is that a majority vote or what? What
Yeah.
is?
Yes, I would say yes.
I mean,
You would yes, or are we sure about that? Because I just want to make sure we don't need 15. Because I just worry about getting 15 people in the room.
It's an interesting question, Ken. I would argue the answer is yes. You need a majority vote to vote the budget. Correct?
No, we need a 2/3 majority vote
Yeah.
to budget.
Okay.
Members.
I also wonder about with so many new members that have now joined us or will be joining us, if a lot of them tend to abstain from votes and those don't count as votes then. So I'm very concerned about that.
So I apologize, Layer. I have a response to that, and Ken and I talked about this. And what I had proposed to Ken is that maybe a day next week, maybe next Thursday night, I don't know, that we do a quick, well, not a quick, but that we do an overview of FY22 with these new members and bring them up to speed. Excuse me, in that hour's time on all these things for the 22 budget, so that when these votes are taken, they're making informed decisions.
Yeah, it's just my observation that a lot of new members tend to abstain from votes in their first couple of meetings, and those we have learned this year officially don't count as anything toward the vote. So that would be concerning. It also reminds me that I think I asked when we made the budget amendment if we had to do a separate approval, and we said no, we don't. So it's just frustrating, and I will cross my fingers. I think that might make sense to have some sort of budget discussion with them, but obviously it's not up to me. But I'm concerned that even if we do have enough people at the meeting, given that we have, I think, 7 new members and counting, that if they abstained for some reason, then we would not have enough votes to pass, and then we'd be in big trouble because our budget is based on this.
I was going to say, you look at section 16B, and it repeatedly says 2/3 of members budget, 2/3 of members budget. And so it would seem to me that if we're talking about something specific for excess and deficiency, because the budget we did use 2/3 of our members, but so a separate vote just on excess and deficiency, that doesn't seem to fall under what's in 16B. So at least it seems like for that would be just a simple majority. And it doesn't even say 2/3 of members. So it would seem that would fall under just whatever quorum we have, the majority of it.
I just think we just want to know, like, because we don't want it to be challenged so close to the end of the.
Yeah, we're out of time, so we need to know before we get to the meeting.
Who would be able to tell us, like, what interpret the Mass
So
General Law for us on that.
So I mean, it could either be Attorney Bartulis, or I can certainly reach out to my contact again at DESE, and ask that question of them. They may refer me back to local policy, in which case, we'd give Attorney Bartulis, a copy of the policy and seek his interpretation.
I just think we just want to have an answer to that question is all I'm saying, because it could make a big difference. It's just not super clear to me.
No, that's why I asked last meeting before we had the budget vote, but we can't go backwards.
I
Yeah.
did recommend that it be on the agenda, but it didn't make the agenda.
I appreciate that, but yeah. Good question.
I'm just taking a quick glance at their regional agreement to see if it.
And then if you have a special meeting for them, is that technically a meeting of our subcommittee that we should all attend so we all have the same information again? Or is that something that they can just be invited to?
So I guess that's a good question. I mean, I guess anyone could attend, but the intent was to meet with the new members of the committee, even if they're not going to be members of finance, but to bring them up to speed rather quickly on things like this. And for example, the Vanpool settlement that you supported earlier this evening, and whatever else.
I mean, Daryl routinely meets with new members. I don't think Dan meeting with them is significantly different.
No. He actually already did, I think, but I don't know what they talked about. I've just heard they had a meeting. I don't know if they would have covered this level of detail. I don't know.
Yeah.
So if I could ask the question, no matter, again, we could just put aside, is a majority vote, 2/3 vote, whatever, will you support at least the recommendation to bring to the full committee the use of 950K and E&D for FY22?
Yeah, that's the question. So I don't think we actually made that motion yet. So
Okay.
I'll take a motion to recommend to the full school committee the use of 950K in excess and deficiency funds for fiscal year 22.
I'll move.
Second.
Is there any further discussion?
Just the one thing I think that, especially, even with the folks who've been on the committee for a while, that would kind of help just to refresh folks' memory, to say, like, last year we were certified at 1.4. We've got this much stuff that we know is going to be falling to the bottom line. To add to that, we pull 950 out, and so we're looking at E&D being at 1.1 or whatever, kind of whatever that. Just being able to talk through that so folks can see, like, we're not fully draining everything out of E&D. That we're projecting that it would probably go down a little bit, but it's not actually dropping 950 because we've got more going in it. But I think that just helped folks to be able to see that it's a large chunk that's coming out, but there's money going in as well.
It seems like more is going in. I know we don't know the final numbers till we know them, but I suspect at the end of the day, it'll probably be more going in than coming out. Is that probably? I don't know. I'm not going to pin you to the wall on that, Dan, but that seems to be the case.
Well, as I've stated, my commitment to you is to get the balance up to at least $1 million.
Right.
That's my goal. At least $1 million.
I think also reminding people that this is what we've already committed to when we approved our budget will be useful, because it is, I think, the same number that we had when we approved the budget.
I think this is just that
it hasn't changed.
A procedural vote.
Exactly.
But with a bunch of new people, have their own say. So, yeah. All right. So, Malaya?
Yes.
Carl?
Yes.
And Mills, yes. So that is approved. Next on the agenda.
I had another question about FY22. I don't know if I should ask it now or just throw it out there for the future. I had two related questions.
Sure, please.
The first is just about the lunch situation, and we don't have to answer this now, but I know that universal free lunch has been extended for next year. So
Yes.
I would be curious how that affects our budget and if there is a plan to address that. I know the kids will be in school more, so that will help. But that's, different than in past years and was part of our reason for a deficit this year. So in the future, I guess I just like to know some sort of plan for that and how we plan to address that.
Okay.
Or if it's not an issue, which is fine because the kids will be there in the buildings and maybe it won't matter.
Now, Dan, my impression is that I don't want to necessarily get into a long conversation about that. I don't think it was the fact that it was free that was the problem. It was that it was the usage that was the problem, because we actually get more per lunch under the federal program than charging kids, right? So as long as they're buying their cookies, sodas, and Jellos on the side that they weren't buying this year, that wasn't that more of the problem.
It was the number of participants, number one. Number two is that also the catering events that Margaret did, and plus the various snacks, etc., that kids normally would buy. She had lost all that revenue. If you recall from previous, and it's in the packet. You'll see that on the lower left hand side, she gives you a breakout from FY19 of those a la carte sales. The a la carte sales that she lost in 20, but very much so in 21. And all that should be back come next September. At least that's the intent, because we'll be back to, I guess, forgive me, the new normal, if that's what it is, or maybe we're back to normalcy.
Yep.
Knock on fake wood.
I appreciate that. It went through my head. So, my second question was, again, maybe a bigger discussion for another day. But I know there was the email that I think I asked you, and I think Ken may have raised, that went around from MASC about whether we need to be approving things like the grant charges. And I don't know that we ever resolved that. It just was a question raised, and I thought it would be on the agenda, but it hadn't come up. So I was curious when we need to have that discussion, or if we need to have that discussion.
So for Kyle, if you're not aware of this, and for Marion and Kim and Christine, as I had stated to Kim, there was a question raised on my listserv. I don't know. I'll say 3 weeks ago. Don't hold me to that. Maybe 2 weeks ago, about whether all grants, be they private, state, federal, needed to be approved by school committee. And there were, at least on my listserv, there were various schools of thought. One school of thought took the MGL and said, "It is my opinion, yes, that they should be approved." And there was another school of thought that said, "I never do it," and so on and so forth. At the same time, the question was raised, I believe, on the mask listserv, and to speed up the story, the recommendation was that grants should be approved by the committee. Probably in October, November, when we know what all the numbers are for the most part for state and federal grants. I argued as well. I think I mentioned to Ken in a separate email that I think this raises a bigger question about best practices. And one of the best practices that we don't do here, but I have done elsewhere, and again, it's subject to interpretation of the Master General Law, are voting warrants. We have a policy here where all three members of the subcommittee need to review the warrant, and that's a policy we honor that. According to MGL, only one person has to review it, but the full committee at its subsequent meeting is supposed to vote the warrant. So if we had a warrant for $2.5 million, I would say Ken as a chair, it'd be on the agenda for school committee, and the full committee, Ken would say that in the payroll warrant, whatever the number is, it was 2.5, and the full committee would vote that. We don't do that here. So I think your question, Belair, I think maybe begs a bigger question. Okay, well, if we should be doing this, then maybe we should also be doing this, because we're not doing that. We're not doing both.
That's come up at MASC meetings before. I've been in meetings where that has, a couple years ago it came up and we didn't really get an answer. I think it was I think it was before you. So anyways, it's a question. So I guess that may be a bigger discussion. I don't know if we have to resolve it at this moment, but perhaps something we need to sort out, because I have heard that as well.
I think
About the
that's
warrants?
a really good thing for
About
business
the
and finance
warrants.
to take up next
For-
year as a group to sort of debate that out and then bring the recommendation to the full
Yes.
school committee, because I can only imagine. And as a person who writes grants, like, I don't even know what that would mean, because I'm writing my grant. There's no school committee. I need that grant approved. And then I can move things within the grant. Like, are we talking about approving my where I put allocations? Are we talking about the narrative that I write with the grant? Like, it just makes me sick thinking about it. It really does. Like, that's one place where I feel like, when a teacher at the middle school needs wipes, I know where I can get them. And if I needed to, make sure that that was written in my grant, so that I'm buying wipes, holy manoli, guys.
I mean, one of the things that we have the ability, Ken, Malayer, and Kyle, is that in a grant, we do, not all the time, but we do budget transfers within a grant. You can move money around in a grant as long as it doesn't exceed 10% of the original line item. So we may do that. I'm not saying it happens all the time again, but it is a practice that can occur. But you don't see those transfers. So to Christine's point, if that is the case, does that mean now that if we're moving money around in a grant before Christine does a formal amendment, but within the guidelines of the grant, I can move money around so long as I don't exceed that 10%. Because when we get to that threshold, that's when Christine has to process a budget amendment with the DESI relative to the grant. But am I bringing now all those transfers to you for approval? I just throw it out there. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, when I read it, it wasn't that level of detail, and I know the warrant discussion in the past has been more of a general, like, listing of this is what we spent and whatever. I don't know. As I said, it's a bigger discussion. Probably valid to have if it's something that's a legal question.
When Joe Bartulis, was interviewing with legal many years ago to represent the district, one thing that he claimed as an expertise, which I'm sure is the case, is policy work. And I think that if we could ask Joe, or I can ask Joe, what have you, to present us with a sample policy for this issue, that could be a starting conversation about what if the school committee thinks that it's transparent enough, and if the administration thinks it's too onerous. Obviously we're not gonna. I mean, I have grants too in my other life, and we move money around as it's legally allowed. I mean, those I don't think we're looking at that level of micromanage. I think accepting the grants is a thing, and whatnot.
My sense is it's a transparency issue when it's been raised, and so.
Yeah.
So we don't have to ask you every few months, what grants do we have and how much are they? Because it's all in the record. But yeah, that might be a good starting point.
And Dan's been doing a good job telling us those things. I think
absolutely.
We just need to put it into policy and have it be a way that I think is both transparent and not onerous, right? At the same time, and hopefully maybe Joe can give us some sample language. Because one thing I'll take blame for this as a former chair of the whole committee, is that we've fallen down the past 3 years or so with our policy work when we've been faced with so much disaster after disaster after disaster, and reviewing policies is kind of what subcommittees are supposed to be doing. And this seems like the first one we could look at, right? is where we are with this with the warrant issue and the grants issue. I'm sure some of our policies have been on the books unreviewed for at least as long as I had been chair, because I was never.
I can tell you, because I've reviewed them for another subcommittee for language issues, that most of our administrative operating policies that aren't ed or something specific have not been reviewed for over 20 years. Most of the hiring policies in the general administrative section, over 20 years. So it's been a long time.
Is that a problem?
It's
I'm
not
just being-
ideal, but
I'm
so it's
just
not
being-
just you, Ken. I guess that's my point.
just
We have
being
some that
funny.
are very old. I mean, the education ones have been reviewed more recently, and
Yeah,
another section I'm blanking on right now. There's two sections that have been reviewed fairly recently, but
the equity team is doing, the equity subcommittee.
that's exactly the subcommittee I'm on. We've been
Yeah.
reviewing them for language issues, and some of them we just like we can't touch these because they've been so outdated. It's a big
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
But it's been a long time. So
I think one thing this subcommittee has done, probably not this past year, but in my first and second year, is that we did look at a couple of financial policies, especially relative to procurement, and we began to, excuse me, to tackle those policies. But a goal also for myself is that I love to tackle maybe two policies next year, like every meeting, and either update them or purge them, and at least get the financial ones up to speed. We've begun to tackle that, but there's much more work to do.
We need to bring Margaret Watson back as a consultant to help us with policies. She was always very good at keeping us on track with those things.
Well, it's come up in diversity. We just didn't want to take over for all the other subcommittees, so we we're picking our way through the ones most relevant. But I shouldn't say we because it doesn't exist right now. But as of a couple weeks ago,
So
there's a list.
So the approval. So are we okay to move on? I just want to make sure we don't need a motion to extend.
No.
So approval of minutes. I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of the April 26, 2021 as were included in the call to meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moving to second. Is there discussions about the minutes they were in the attachment of the invitation to the meeting? Okay, seeing none, Malaya?
Yes. Sorry.
Carl?
Yes.
Mills, yes. Next item on the agenda is the next meeting. I actually want to pass that over because I feel as though we're going to reorg before the next meeting. So I don't think we should be setting the next meeting for the next committee unless, I mean, I think it sort of depends too, Dan, on, town meetings and how the 15th goes. And if you need us after the 15th, we should make a meeting after the 15th. Everything goes well on the 15th. It seems more appropriate to wait until, the towns, because what are our dates for
There's one the 14th. That's why we couldn't meet the 14th.
Right, the 14th is
Forget.
Sterling. Is Sterling. Rutland is Saturday night. And
so have a budget, or we'll be waiting for Paxton in the end of June, right?
yes.
Yeah. Carl has a nod as though if we're waiting for Paxton, we might as well start having a meeting. Is that your?
It's my understanding that for Paxton, both FinCom and the Board of Selectmen have voted to support our budget now because of the adjustment. I did have a very brief conversation today with the town administrator out in Rutland, and it's still up in the air in terms of what's going to happen Saturday night. Apparently, there is an override on their warrant for Saturday night.
Yeah.
And obviously, if the override passes, then there's the support for the budget. If the override doesn't pass, then I guess it could go either way. But at the end of the day, the representatives, the attendees are, will make that decision one way or the other.
That's not entirely true, though, because even if the override passes
failed.
The meeting, it has to pass the ballot.
It failed at the ballot, so they have bigger issues, and their override is not just because of the school committee. So I don't know how that's going to turn out, but
well, we'll wait until the voters get their vote, and we'll just have to respond.
Yeah.
If you need us before June 28th,
Yeah.
we'll definitely meet. But I think that otherwise, maybe we should just wait till the reorg. What do you think about that?
That's fine. Certainly, Ken, I can stay in contact with you. It's fair to say that that the three of you are going to be around at least until the 28th of June, and hopefully there'll be continuity moving forward. I would welcome that, and we'll have two new members And Ken, so I guess it's safe to say that I won't be doing, or we, because we talked about this, that we won't have that like orientation with the newbies. And we'll leave that up to Darryl to run interference for us.
I wasn't saying that. I was saying that I don't know there needs to be an official meeting of the subcommittee for you and or I to meet with some of the new members, as long as there's no quorum issues. I don't think I was more responding to Malaya's observation.
Okay.
Meeting, that's the case. I think we can meet with them, as an informational session, where if we're not deliberating and you're just giving them information as an orientation, unless district council feels differently about the open meeting law. The Thursday night's the only night next week that doesn't really work for me, but
I just threw it out there. I mean, maybe Wednesday night. But if there are 7 new members,
There's at least 7 that and there may be another one in Holden this, I think Monday they're supposed to do that. So there will be maybe 8 by then.
who do we lose in Holden?
It's to replace,
Scott.
what, yeah, and my brain isn't working today.
Scott Brown.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, they have applicants, but they haven't appointed anyone yet.
Okay.
And I think they're planning to do it at their first meeting, which I think is Monday. So.
Well, Ken, you and I can have a sidebar discussion tomorrow if you like. And again, last thing we want to do is cause any problems in terms of quorums or have official meetings when that wasn't the intent, for sure.
But again, that E&D transfer is simply procedure, because as you guys said, it's already been voted. You guys already voted that number into the budget, and that budget that you voted has already been sent to towns.
It is procedure, but I've just observed a lot of our newer members the past couple of years, at least, have been very hesitant to vote on things their first couple of meetings. And it's actually caused some problems with some votes where we didn't have things passed or barely had things passed. And I just, if there are several budget related matters or things of that nature, they might need to know about it. Maybe it may help with that trend.
Dan will reach out to our council to determine whether or not that is what the number of what the majority or that piece of the voting, right? Dan?
We just want to be cautious that whatever we do with new members is Finance 101 information. It's not giving them an avenue to deliberate, particularly in the budget this year. To me, that seems different than just Finance 101,
I think I remember when Carl came on and he had to do that. I'm pretty sure he was in a suit down in Dan's office, like sitting at attention. Isn't that true, Carl?
Oh, I don't know. That was so long ago. I mean, that was like 20 years ago. Although
tonight feels like
19 of those 20 were just last year. So
listen, we have to get to bed.
Yeah.
All right. So
Thank you.
Nothing else on the agenda. I would take a motion with thanks to district administration and their guests who are behind their drawing letter K tonight, and take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So just like in our legal affairs where we only had 3, I came to the realization that if I don't second it, we can't end the meeting.
Yep.
Well, that was the point where Bob Ember was like, fine, then I'm just going to leave. So, but
I like you all, but it would be nice to
so I second.
All right. So Malaya?
Yes.
Carl?
Yes.
And Mills, yes. So we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. And
thank you.
See you later.
Thank you. Okay, good night. Yep, bye.